Welcome to the Programming Lions podcast. Do you ever wonder why the left and the right think the way that they do, behave, and have the biases the way that they do? Well, if so, this episode is for you. We've got Anthony Rispo joining us today. He is a recent graduate in psychology from Columbia. He's also well studied in sociology and neuroscience. And we're going to break all this down, peel back the layers. So let's get into it. Anthony Rispo, welcome to the Programming Alliance podcast. We're excited to have you on. I was able to connect with you on social media, and we looked at some of your takes and insights on unique things happening and cool perspectives that you had. Yeah.
Thank you for having me, you guys. It was so much fun to get your message and to come upon your channel and to see the work you do. And it's so exciting to watch you interact with your sons on these topics. So I'm glad to be here.
All
Yeah.
right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, without further ado, we'll get in. We got a few kind of areas and topics queued up.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So the first question is that I just heard that you graduated from the Columbia as a university, Columbia
That's correct.
University.
Yeah. Yeah, just graduated.
Pretty
Yeah.
prestigious one, Max.
It's
This
pretty
is like
big.
this is like one of the best. This is one of the best schools in the
A
country.
controversial one at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
Spotlight for sure.
So, so can you tell us more about your field of study and focus, and what are you doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So like as you mentioned, I just graduated from Columbia University with a bachelor's in psychology. So I'm a little older, I'm 35, and usually your average college student is much younger. But I came back to school or went back to school to study psychology because I really love the discipline itself, just as a whole, human behavior, the way we
Mm-hmm.
think, behave, the way how we're motivated, how we learn, how we remember things. So just the whole spread of psychology and even neuroscience, like what's going on in the brain when we do those things,
Mm.
just really was always very interesting to me. So I went back to school to study this pretty late in the game. I'm a professional musician first and foremost. I've been doing that since I was 9.
Oh, man.
Classical organ.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
yeah,
Okay.
You do
yeah,
organ? That's
yeah,
kind
I
of cool.
do. I play.
Yeah. Max plays good. Max plays
Oh,
guitar.
nice.
Oh,
Electric or acoustic? What do you?
I do classical guitar. I
Oh,
want to get into electric ones, like the.
yeah.
the
That's awesome. That's great. That's great. Yeah, yeah. So, like I was saying, I graduated in May, and you asked, what am I doing now? Well, really, I had the goal in mind or the vision in mind that I would go into another program, that I would go into a PhD program to get my, to
mhm.
become Dr. Rispo. But
There you go. Right.
this is a very long process, and the application process is not the same as if you were to apply to a master's. Little procedural stuff that's a little boring. Long story short, I took a different route and I decided that I would just graduate. But I also kind of, just decided one day to post something on Instagram, to post a reel about the state of affairs at Columbia back in April, I
Mhm.
think it was. And the video was very simple. It was just that because of the protests that are going on or have been going on for the past almost 2 years now on campus, that our attendance has dropped and the acceptance rate has increased by about 1%. That was a piece of information that came out in April. All I said was that this is an issue when it comes to Columbia's reputation. There's about a 30-something second clip. So then for my Instagram page, that went viral. I mean, it's when you look at it, it's actually not viral, but compared to my, whatever I would post prior to
Yeah.
that. And so I just kept on going with that. And I found that people were interested in what I was saying. And so here I am now. I'm just kind of trying to keep that going and doing more writing and more connecting with other
Yeah.
researchers. So yeah.
You obviously enjoy research
Mhm.
and analysis just based on your perspectives and takes on different things that are happening. So, I'm curious, like, what do you want to do? Like, what's your end goal or your kind of career aspiration?
It's a great question. It's very hard to go into a situation thinking you know exactly what you want to do, and then you come out of it even
Sure,
later in
sure.
life thinking, "Oh, that's not it." But the main theme is still there. So apart from wanting to do the PhD sort of as a goal at one point, that whole thing hasn't really left. I really want to do research, or want to dive into research more as either a writer or someone who does his own research independently. And so for me, that's really at the heart of it, to look into the scientific literature, psychological literature, the neuroscience literature, and to really sift through the different research programs or the different research questions that various researchers put forth, and to understand them more deeply, their methodology, how these researchers sort of surgically remove or surgically look at the world through observation
Yeah.
and put together some kind of model of the world to show us, well, this is
Mm.
probably what's going on. And the problem with that is that before you do that, you have to have assumptions as a researcher. You have to think, well, this thing's happening because likely because of this thing. And if your
Mhm.
assumptions are not grounded in former knowledge or other research that's been established, then you're just kind of going based on a whim. And so there's a lot of psychological research that
Mhm.
goes in that direction. And for many years, it's caused much distortion in the general public. And at one point, there was something called
Yeah.
the replication crisis in psychology, which means that you do a study and you can't replicate it. So it really defeats the purpose of coming up with something that could generalize.
Yeah.
So that's really what I'm interested in, is to really dissect research, to understand it fully, and to explain it to the general public. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's kind of cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after like because we've talked to now a lot of people and we've actually seen videos of like colleges that and they're typically pretty liberal, right?
Yeah.
And I suspect it would probably be even more liberal in like the psychology and stuff that you're doing.
Hmm.
So I'm just wondering, like, what's your experience with that, and how is that like? Just like being probably around a lot more liberal people as a
Yeah. Yeah.
conservative.
So I'm still learning about this particular dynamic because it's a real, you're putting your finger on something that's real. Academia in general, colleges, universities they do lean more liberal, especially in psychology, in the social sciences, really, anything that's studying
Right.
humanity. And, you know, I've not had much of a problem with this, but looking at it from a broader perspective, it it is a problem because it's a cultural issue within the academy. You have researchers that have the incentive to produce X amount of papers a year based on the grant money that they
Mhm.
receive, and they have to do it.
Mhm.
And getting into the journals, the academic journals, is also very important for one's status, one's credibility, just like anything else really outside of science. You think about any other career, and think about music streaming, getting
Mhm.
as many views as you can and gaining credibility. A little bit of a different process, but the same idea. It's all about credibility. And when your incentive is to produce as much as you can and to get published as much as you can, given that the culture leans in one direction, you have to really please that particular narrative. So it isn't the case that the researchers that I've met or the professors that I've met are necessarily as hostile toward Republicans or conservatives or middle of the road people per se, but their incentive is very self-oriented, and
Mhm.
it creates a very ideologically skewed environment where now you're coming in with a different perspective, and it's
Hmm.
like alien to them. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's not quite alien, but it's just something they don't touch because they don't want their reputations to be affected. Yeah.
It's almost like a snowball effect,
Yeah.
right? Then the more of that happens, then the more of that outcome occurs, and the harder it is to maybe get more diverse views. I also
That's
like
right.
I don't know, but I think somebody told me once that liberals generally are, into social sciences because they are more about people, whereas conservatives are more about building, just sort of innately the way that their brain is structured. So maybe this is like a relation to neuroscience, but it was an interesting thought that somebody shared with me, and it made a little bit of sense. But basically, their argument was that like liberal ideology type of people will typically drift towards academia and these types of social sciences, versus maybe a conservative will drift more towards being an entrepreneur and starting a
Mm-hmm.
business and
That,
building some widget.
yeah, that's right. And that's yes. There's, I don't know if you're familiar with the factor five personality construct. It would
Hmm.
be open, yeah, yeah. Ocean, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, and these are all different traits that human beings express in one way or another. All five of
Right.
them, and there are several others that have been put forth, but these are the staple. These are the ones that have withstood the test of time and statistical rigor. And so it is
Mm-hmm.
true that those on the left tend to be higher in trait openness, or
Hmm.
openness to experience, which expresses itself as openness to aesthetics, feelings, emotions, and imagination. And it's correlated with careers such as writing, art, poetry, therapy, and college teaching,
Hmm.
particularly in the humanities. And therefore, they often excel in careers that involve abstract, creative, and conceptually complex work. Conscientiousness is a different trait that is, it encompasses industriousness, which that extends to self-discipline and high achievement, and also tends to correlate strongly with conservatism. As it turns out, also you can't do your job successfully as a firefighter, police officer, or construction worker, or a member of the military if you're abstracting and imagining how to approach your job while on the clock. You can't.
Right. Right.
You
Fair.
have to be reliable. You have to have a plan in place. You have to know a bunch of things at the ready should something happen on a given moment's notice. You know exactly what to do. But I'm simplifying some of this,
Hmm.
of course, but that's the gist. And it turns out that academia is tends to be too abstract for types like that. Arguably, many in the working class too, and those outside of academia generally tend to be those in the working class. They wouldn't want the luxury of having the time of sitting, to sit back and teasing out pet theories in sociology, or coming up with
Yeah.
obscure
Yeah.
ideas. They've got things that they have to do. And actually, for your
Yeah.
audience, if they're interested, there's a
Mm-hmm.
there's a sociologist by the name of Musa Al-Gharbi who teaches at Stony Brook University out in Long Island, and he wrote a book called "We Have Never Been Woke." And the title is a little deceiving. It's for a reason. And
Hmm.
he's not saying that, wokeness is not real. He's laying out how it evolved and how it evolves in waves, and basically talks about something called symbolic capitalists, who are the types of people who end up
Mm-hmm.
in academia, in the media, who create knowledge and put it out into the world, and who kind of have the luxury of doing this. They're not the
Yeah.
highest income earners, but they still position themselves in a place of intellectual authority. And they're the kinds of people
Yeah.
who will sit by and talk about what we ought to do for poor Americans, Black Americans, Latino Americans, etc. But they
Uh-huh.
themselves don't do the things they claim ought to be done. So, yeah.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah, we see that a lot.
A lot of people.
Well, it's
Yeah.
it's an interesting dynamic too, because you have your academia. I feel like it sort of steers the path of society in some ways in terms of research and what's right, maybe even morality. I guess, like, I'm curious on your thoughts of, does that run the risk of a societal shift going in one direction because they are the ones that are steering academia?
That's a really good question. And that is a question that I grapple with all the time. I should go back and quickly say that just
Yeah.
because there's an asymmetry in representation in the academy favoring the
Mhm.
left, it doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't a conservative or moderate base out there that would like to be part of academia. There's a lot of people who are
Mhm.
silent,
Hmm.
but you know, it to the question, is this asymmetry? Does this have? I mean, I'm paraphrasing what you said. Does this have sort of some kind of effect on how it shapes culture? If I'm getting,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think that's what we've been seeing over the past 5 or so plus decades, that because these humanities based programs are so focused
Hmm.
on the human being and the human experience, and don't require a methodological rigor and empirical basis upon which these claims can be made falsifiable, like you can actually test them to
Yeah.
see if they're
Yeah.
true or not, that you could
Right.
just kind of come up with anything, as long as you have an iterative process to guide you, where you have, well, that theorist said this and this theorist said that, and I'm just going to put a web of things together, and maybe it sounds like I'm simplifying it, but unfortunately you read some of this stuff, it's that simple. It's not that the humanities it's not that it's a simplistic endeavor, it's just that it's easy to be unfalsifiable in your claims, and to just posture yourself as the authority of a given
Right.
topic. So anyway, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that what you're saying or asking, I think, is what we've been seeing and what we are seeing. The only way I can attack that question or concern is actually by looking under the hood and seeing where it really comes from. And I guess if we see
Right.
where it comes from, we can kind of figure out how to grapple with it better. And I can't say that it comes from one spot in particular, but there's a few things. So there was a prisoner, a
Hmm.
communist activist and linguist by the name of Antonio Gramsci, who lived at the
Hmm.
end of the 19th century in Italy. And
Mhm.
he was imprisoned by the fascists. And he was there for 15 years in prison. And he wrote letters from prison. And there's the prison notebook, letters from his prison cell, really. And he talked about a way in which we deal with the hostility that you see from communists and fascists. So he didn't
Mhm.
believe he believed we needed to change. We meaning human beings generally, but let's just say he believed Italians, and broadly speaking, people experiencing the fascist regime, the way that they could fix this problem was not through blunt force, as the fascists did, or even as the communists did. He said, no, we have to do it through a cultural infusion. We have to get into the academy. We have to do it through knowledge. And then this
Right.
became coined, the term is cultural hegemony. So you're
Mhm.
literally infusing ideology. The shortcut explanation is you're infusing ideology into knowledge, places where knowledge
Yeah.
is created and
Yeah.
disseminated. And so then over time,
It
it
takes hold.
takes
But it takes
it
time,
takes
right?
time.
Like,
Yeah.
it takes a few generations or
Yeah, it
something?
does. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
I am kind of going off of that a little bit.
Sure.
There's a lot of research nowadays, right? So I'm curious how you can tell, and how possibly our viewers, if a research is like good or if it's false, if it's like telling the truth, if it's not telling the truth.
Mhm.
Okay. These are all so important. And the one thing I want to hit right over the head first is sometimes people will say, well, it was funded by this group or that group. Well, if your data is good, it doesn't matter. That's my view. If your
Right.
data is, first of all, let me expand on that. If your data is available to the public or to scientists
Mhm.
to test and to use and to try to replicate or to tease things out, then I don't care if, you know, King Tut comes from the dead and back from the dead, and I don't care if
Mhm.
I don't care who funds it. It just, if the data's
Yeah.
good, let me take it and let me figure out what's up with it. That's what matters.
Mhm.
So that's a little bit of a tangent, but I think that's an important.
So if they're not transparent with the data, that would be one
Yeah, I don't care if you're that's
obvious,
the
like,
thing is like if we're
question.
having so many problems, like if it's, oh, it's NIA. This is the problem with right now. We're questioning institutions and authority because we've been led to believe certain things that now we get access to data and we see, oops, that's not really that on
Right.
target. So I don't care if it has NaH next to it. I want the data. I want to know if I can get the data.
Mhm.
I want to see what you're saying. Great, see your results, but let me see the data and let me be able to run it myself. So that's point
Mhm.
one.
Yeah.
But this is very important. So, I guess buckle up. So how does a person who doesn't really spend time with research or just general public know if studies are you could trust them or not? And I'm afraid I don't have I have a long answer. I'll try to trim it, but I don't have a satisfactory one in that the reason is not because there's no way to separate the wheat from the chaff, but first,
Mhm.
Mhm.
empirical research is often held hostage by, like I was saying, institutional gatekeepers, academic journals
Yeah.
typically. And I said this before, the incentive, basically it's paywalled, similar to like news sources these days, in a way, this is how they
Yeah.
prevent people from engaging with science more critically. And maybe that's a little conspiratorially positioned. And I guess you can take away the conspiracy and just say that seems to be an effect. I mean, if you paywall something, you don't have access, and if you don't have access, you don't get to know it. So, but access to knowledge is what generates conversation. But the other part is that understanding and knowing how to read empirical papers, which most people don't. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't be
Mhm.
teaching students as young as high school or middle school, even, I don't know, how to read these papers. The fact is we don't do it at scale, at least. And when students do engage with these papers, they're only told to read the abstract and the conclusion or something
Right.
like that. Being told that they don't need to know all these stats and methods. And well, that's kind of insane to me. I mean, at least if you don't know it, and if you're not a math type, we should be engaging with people who do know how to do that, interacting and collaborating with people who do. So the
Mhm.
most important
Mhm.
part
Yes.
of a scientific paper is the method section, I would say, which outlines
Mhm.
how the study is set up, and
Mm.
how it's operation, how variables are operationalized, and that would mean how the researcher defines what they're measuring and how they measure their variables. And I would say, though, more so, or not more so, but equal to methods, like I'd mentioned before, the assumptions that precede experiments or studies. Arguably, the assumptions are more important than the methods because this is what articulates the question of your research. So
Mhm.
I'll give you an example if you're willing to hang on for just a moment. This will
Yeah.
clarify things. Okay. So for instance, microaggressions. And for those listening, microaggressions, a very loose definition, is basically a perceived slight based on, it's like targeted toward racial minorities. And
Mhm.
these slights are sort of like the undercurrent is that they're automated by implicit bias, right? So even
Mhm.
if you quote, didn't mean to say something or to slight someone, whatever that means, it's left to
Yeah.
interpretation by the person who feels slighted, which is a big
Right.
problem. You're still kind of in the hot seat because and you're sort of in a hopeless position because it's what these researchers will say, well, it's because of your implicit bias that ran away from you and caused you to be harmful anyway. And an example of a microaggression would be if a teacher tells a black student that they did a beautiful job reading, say an excerpt of Shakespeare, for instance. Perhaps this teacher is generally complimentary to students who read Shakespeare well, but let's say most students actually don't do this. Just a few do. However, it just so happens that the black student this time did. And you could see how this might come
Mhm.
across as, overcompensating on the teacher's part. If your worldview is that, white people think black people are stupid, so when a white person compliments a black person, they don't mean it, or they're just saying, "Wow, you're usually so stupid, and I'm so impressed that you're not
Yeah.
stupid here in this
Yeah.
moment." So that's an example of a
Mhm.
microaggression and or how they unfold the microaggression rather, not what a
Yeah.
microaggression is per se. So it's an all-out global attack on if somebody says this kind of thing about somebody articulately reading Shakespeare, it's an implied global attack on being a Black student in the context of white spaces, which, according to the Church of
Mhm.
Social Justice, is
Can't
yeah,
do that.
exactly. So that's a mouthful. And there's a few
Yeah.
more details, but
Well,
about how to actually
yeah.
dive into knowing when research like that is not to trust.
It's hard too
Yeah,
because, I feel like so many things are happening fast these
right.
days.
I guess a more distilled and maybe action ready approach could be, you know, to know that one paper isn't the whole story, to
Mhm.
understand that what the researchers are asking and what they are assuming, like in the
Yeah.
microaggressions case, they have all these assumptions about what it means to be white and how that interacts in these spaces. And you know that that's their starting point. They start with a conclusion and we use methods and analysis to validate that conclusion without even testing it
Yeah.
first. So,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
Mhm.
so basically knowing what they're assuming, and then read the methods section if you can stomach through it. Go
Even
on.
when they do even when you do explain it and you say it's bogus, here's why. A lot of times, well, it's published, so, like,
Oh yeah, that's it.
scientists
That's a
agree,
well, it's an
right?
appeal to authority fallacy. Absolutely.
Right.
And then what I usually say is, all right, let's walk through the fact that there's really poor follow-up on a lot of these studies,
Mm.
that there's a selection bias, that you'll have maybe 100 people in some studies, that your sample population, a specific population you're looking into is the trans population, specific issue, and only, like, I don't know,
Mhm.
20 of them will participate. There is a study like this, by the way, and then they blow up the numbers based on the effects that they see in just those 20 or so people, but the rest of
Right.
the 80 plus people didn't participate. You have no information on, and most of the meta-analyses on these issues are self-report based. But if somebody's so fixed in their ideology, then the only thing that I feel like I'm able to do at this point, to be honest, is take a meta
Mhm.
perspective and to continue to talk about the way these studies are architected, to continue to,
Uh-huh.
you know, connect with people like you guys, build a network and just get
Mhm.
louder. I think that people who are not positioned to feel the cognitive dissonance as a invitation toward curiosity, but rather hostility and volatility, are going to stay there. You're
Yeah.
able to
Yeah.
know when someone's inching toward curiosity, when they start to ask things like, "This is just my experience with, but what about this?" And they go into the
Mhm.
whataboutisms. But I find that to be a good place to be with someone, because it means that they're not on the they're not in attack mode per se.
Right.
They're experiencing a cognitive dissonance, and there's some wiggle room to work with. And of course, it depends on their personality structure. If you have someone who's high in narcissism or combative or antagonistic, I would say just throw your, surrender, and just,
Mhm. Yeah.
maybe that's not the right approach, but there's so
Yeah.
much. I don't know what your experience is, particularly talking to people like this, but it can get aggravating, you know.
Yeah.
There's so much you
Well,
can do.
I
Right.
don't know, what would you
Yeah,
boys
what
say?
would
What's
you
your
what would you both
experience?
do, Will and Max?
If, like, we started talking to a narcissist, basically?
Someone who is very difficult to who put it this way, who
Debate or
yeah.
negotiate with? Like,
Oh, well, I'd probably start off by trying to talk to them normally,
Mhm.
and if that doesn't work, then I'll start matching their energy, right? Maybe they're starting to get mad at me. I'll start getting mad at them,
I
right?
tend
No, 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 not fighting.
not
Yeah.
fighting, but yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah, and then if it gets too far, I'll probably just be like, I'm not getting anything done useful here,
Mhm, mhm.
so hasta la vista.
you're out.
Mhm.
You're out,
Yeah.
buddy. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
We
yeah.
do engage with people on our comments. We actually held we're kinda in the summer phase now, but we were holding
Yeah.
what we called roundtable
Hmm.
debates or discussions with other kids around their
Oh,
age.
great.
Yeah.
And, like, we had some liberal leaning kids on, an anarchist, a
Oh,
communist,
wow.
other conservatives. Yeah, it's crazy. And so we'd bring up topics, and it was pretty interesting. Like, I think most of them, we tried to vet to make sure that people that came on were in good faith, and I'd say most of them were. But we found,
Most.
yeah,
Keyword being most.
I
Yeah.
love this.
Yeah. Most of
What you're
them.
doing is exemplary of open inquiry, a Socratic experience, talking about
Mhm.
all sorts of issues. And anybody who looks at this channel and who knows that understands that this is what's happening because ideology on the trans side of things, on the LGBTQ plus side of things, on the social justice side of things, it doesn't allow for daylight. It's very
Yeah.
rigid, and it's got that, how shall I say, almost a kind of well, it's authoritarian for sure when
Mhm.
there's no daylight that's able to enter there, and to be open to ideas, to explore and talk about different ideas, and to interface with people who have different ideas, really allows the brain to experience a smorgasbord of
Yeah.
appetites and capacities, and you able to dial back the levers. Over time you become used to a little bit of conflict, a little bit of aggression. You can actually train yourself to be in difficult environments, and it's great that you boys are, and your father is leading you into this world with this skill, because my gosh, the people that I go to, I have to say, some people that I was in school with, you can't, it's almost like you can't touch certain issues without them just completely falling apart, you
Yeah.
know?
Losing it?
It's very common. It's very
Yeah,
common. Like you just keep like certain topics are off limits unless you completely agree with that person on that thing.
right.
Then you
You're
talk
giving them
about
an
it.
intellectual
Um,
immune
You guys
system.
become best friends.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a real problem. And of course, people that come and look at our channel have strong opinions because of some reel that we put out or whatever. But in general, like our philosophy is we're gonna, expose ourselves to all types of different people. I mean, we've had trans people on our show, we've
Wow.
had
Yeah.
anti-MAGA people on our show, we've got people like you on our show that have like a deeper sense of understanding in terms of psychology and sociology. And so like we're just interested in learning,
Yeah.
and of course, we develop opinions based on our maybe moral foundation, but we can apply that when we talk to people. And so, yeah, if you know how to, like, if your ideas aren't pressure tested, then are they really good ideas? And so we feel like if we can pressure test our ideas, and we're just going to be stronger over time.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
But I think in today's age, unfortunately, a lot of people aren't allowing for the pressure testing of their ideas because they're just so tied to an ideology. And
Yeah.
this goes into a question I was going to
Hmm.
ask you about, like our experience, and if this is like too political, you can tell us.
Yeah.
But
It's fun.
our
Yeah.
experience with the left has been fairly like rough and negative. I've found that, and this doesn't equate to like everybody because I've had productive conversations with people on the left, but by and large, it's very much like compliance or like they are like it's compliance or
Or nothing.
you are an idiot, and then it
Yeah.
automatically goes to like, if you don't believe this, ad hominem, name calling, like whatever it might
Or
be.
sometimes it even goes to TDS where you just start bringing up Trump for no
Yeah,
reason.
or the subject changes from like something that doesn't involve Trump at all to yes, like Trump.
Trump
Yeah,
did
yeah,
this.
you voted for a grapist, right? So I'm curious, like your experience with conservatives and liberals in terms of their openness to exploring their own ideas and pressure testing them.
Mm. Well, nothing's too political, by the way. I should just say this is good.
Okay.
There's a few things. So just to get to basics, from the personal level, from my own experience, I was very much so on the far left in my 20s. I'm 35 now. Broke out of that after the pandemic. Reasons for that are because of such intense cognitive dissonance. Just to very briefly give you kind of what happened after George Floyd's death, I tried to get family members to put black squares on their Instagram. That was not fruitful, and I freaked out. There were other things that happened. I mean, especially the trust the science movement around the vaccines and masks and all that. And
Mm.
then the moralizing of these issues and the vilifying people who didn't get to say goodbye to their loved ones. And I think it also hit hard for me, especially because at the time, and still well, at the time, my cousin was just starting her career as a nurse at a really busy hospital. Of course, all hospitals were busy at that point, but a
Yeah.
particularly busy hospital in the area. And the stories that she would tell us, and she would just go silent often because they were just too hard to tell, of
Right.
people not being able to see their loved ones, of people dying left and right, and
Yeah.
being around that, if you know what I mean. It just felt off that after this, this was after a while putting things together, that we have this movement of people who are basically not only saying trust the science around masks and vaccines. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I use masks. I'm not trying to save face or anything. I'm just saying that's what it was. But the point being, so it was that, and then it was the protesters at Capitol buildings, and I was all on board with
Mhm.
like kind of like shaming them at one point. But then the BLM riots and the BLM protests were allowed to happen suddenly. So it was
Yeah.
all these double standards, and I started to pick back at, like, in my 20s, of other double standards, and
Mhm.
it just like I said, the cognitive dissonance, the held belief conflicting with new information was so intense that I
Mhm.
kind of erupted emotionally, and I can't tell you what the turning point was, the day per se, but
Mm.
all I knew was at that point was that I was really using a lot of my own, what you call intrapsychic tension, or internalizing anxiety and things like that, as motivation to lash out at others. And
Mhm.
I decided, I had a really bad argument with my brother who voted for Trump, and it got bad, and I thought to myself, is this what I want? You know?
Right.
Um, and all things being equal, I had an evolution from that point. So all that is to say, there is a particular way in which left-leaning folks moralize public policy, and it's toward
Mhm.
a more egalitarian perspective that would say, for instance, we're all kind of in this together, and we all have to do this thing in order to
Mhm.
experience
Mhm.
The
the
greater
Yeah.
greater
good. The greater
right,
good,
Yeah.
the
right?
greater good.
Mhm.
And there's
Yeah.
there's a time and a place for that. It makes sense within the scope of human history, of course. I think we band together during times of conflict. I saw it during 9/11,
Right.
but they take it to an extreme. For instance, the left has a history of pushing back against institutions and institutionalized religion. That's a bit redundant. Religion is an institution. Institutions like religion, I should say, and replaced with a different belief system that is more humanitarian. Humanism really fills that spot, and you kind of get rid of the
Yeah.
mandates of the church, of the sort of like hierarchical true
Yeah.
north that everybody's under, that everybody in a faith tradition, a more conservative situation, will adhere to. And my idea is that,
Mhm.
and this is supported to some degree through moral foundations theory by Jonathan Haidt and others, that
Mhm.
conservatives tend to focus more on binding principles, which concerns safety and loyalty, things like that, and to have cohere around borders and protection. And it's not really about like what you look like, it's about, do you abide by these governing principles that will protect us all? And we're all Americans, and
Yeah.
we all live under this true north kind of thing. And so a lot of the internal tensions that people experience in that situation will have an outlet. you know, Someone breaks the law, there's due process. Someone says something I don't like, oh well, freedom of speech, and we're all
Right.
protected under that binding principle, right? It's like, I don't have to worry about if
Right.
you
Yeah.
call me something, it's fine, because you know what? I can too, and neither of us are going to be going to jail unless you live in Britain these days. And
Mm.
and it's cool, dude, it's like whatever. But the left has repudiated and rejected so much of those binding principles that coheres, that brings people together under this common thread, and replaces it usually with a social contract that looks more like social justice, that your
Yeah.
tax dollars must go to this program because it saves people, it feeds people, and how could you not want to pay
Yeah.
that? How could you not?
Can't put a price on
Yeah,
that. Can't put a price on cancer
No.
research. I was having a debate with somebody about that today,
What was
actually.
the debate? I'm curious.
Can't put a price on. He's like, you can't put a price on cancer research. I'm like, well, I mean, I can if I don't, unless I have infinite money.
Right. Right.
It's kind of crazy. Haven't been found yet.
Yeah.
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 So, but yeah, that's a good point. It's a
Yeah.
good point. It's
So basically the way they
Um,
moralize issues is much more pronounced, and there's no outlet. When I won't do this, I'm just saying, you have a Tesla, I'm going to key your car because you having a Tesla means you support Elon Musk. Elon Musk
yeah,
equals, taking away funding. Taking away funding
yeah,
means hurting people. Hurting people means you're not empathetic. Not being empathetic means you're a
hmm
bad person. And you know what we do to bad people? We punish them. You see how that downward
yeah,
arrow leads straight to the bottom of HE double hockey sticks to vengeance? There
right,
is no outlet. All it is a spiral downward. And once they get to that spiral downward, they don't know how to build it up because they've been so busy being cynical and hateful towards those who disagree with them. So there's a rigidity on the
yeah.
left right now that's very locked in.
why?
It makes sense. They
uh,
seem to. They definitely like. We joke a little bit. This probably isn't a nice term, but I say the left. They operate like a hive mind,
Oh yeah.
versus conservatives have wildly different views.
Yeah, and I should just caveat, I should say that, you when all is said and done, at the end of the day, extremism exists on both ends. I made a video about fascism being sort of a reaction to communism, and the more
Yeah,
of a spiral you go down in the socialist sort of everybody gets everything they want and we're going to make the rich pay for it, the more of a reaction you're going to get on the other side, and we are seeing that a little bit,
right.
so we should be aware
Yeah,
of
we
that.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I have a question.
Sure.
We already went over this a little bit, right? But I'm curious. Why do you think that the left generally stay in one clump? They don't want to expand their views.
They
Yet
don't. They don't break out of line.
yeah,
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 yet
they just like
conservatives
stay.
they have a lot of different views, right?
That's a great question, and it's one that I actually actively study. I don't have a lab or I'm not collecting data on it right now at this point in my life, but it's a question that I have been thinking about a lot. I've had professors who do this work, some friends who are researchers that do some of this work, and everybody's scratching their heads, when push comes to shove. I mean, the what we can say right now is going back to the way in which people on the left moralize specific issues. It's so attached to their concept of being a good person.
right.
How could you
Mm.
deny someone food stamps? That is just awful. They don't think about, and there's an immediacy and a validity to the immediacy in their grievance. If you think about, I don't know, you boys, I don't know if your father's talked to you about the Johnson administration, after, during the
Oh.
civil rights movement. He came in after Kennedy was killed, and you know, you
Yeah.
had, prior to the Johnson administration, you had Black Americans that were eventually closing the gap when it came to income, wealth inequality, disparities between whites and blacks, and but they did
hmm
that through their own volition and on their own accord. And they used capitalism. They used what we had in place to build themselves up. You saw that start to drop a bit in the 50s. And then you had, unfortunately, the grievance of the left is at its core is correct when it says that you've had racists and white supremacists, in the Jim Crow era that pushed time back. And
hmm
that's all very true. And it did push Black Americans back. But then you had, it's always a pendulum. And then you had Johnson essentially put forth all these programs that would really help the suffering of people who had the fallout of that regression that happened. But the
Yeah.
problem was that it was sort of a superficial, overheated way of creating an even playing field. One of the programs would necessarily have mothers or women or men of families leave their families so that the family could be qualified for programs. So it's just one example. And
Yeah.
so
There's these entitlement programs in general. I think what you're saying is, and we have talked about this a lot,
Mm,
boys, where there's a problem. It's homelessness. Let's
Yeah.
put money towards homelessness. Homelessness gets worse. There's a problem with inequality of Black communities. So let's put money into the pockets of them through incentive programs where we'll give single mothers money.
right,
Oh,
Well,
single mother problem gets worse.
right.
So it's like there's good intentions, and I give them credit for like big hearts and good intentions, but the results of the actions that they do
it
actually have the opposite outcome. And that's like
It-
I try to convince people like, hey, you know,
That's not good.
and
That's
it
not
yeah,
typically
good.
like and it encourages people to actually do that, right? Like you said, give money to people like don't have children or something, right? Like wait,
single
just
mothers
yeah,
maybe.
single
Yeah.
yeah,
mothers.
yeah.
Mhm.
It's an
Well, then just don't have children. Oh wait, I have free money. What the heck,
Yeah,
right?
it creates
Mhm.
a fracture in the family unit, and then that gets stereotyped, and that becomes part of the what people think of when they think of these families. And
Mhm.
so it is psychological at base. It's sociological. It's something that the people on the left don't want to address because it hits to your question. It hits hard against their moral compass because what they hear when you say we need to crack down on education and we need to be harder. We need to be actually more stringent and more focused on how we teach and how the materials that we use for students in Black and brown communities and poor communities. The trick is not to lower standards, it's actually to increase them because the results are just look up, in your own time, and for your listeners to Success Academy in New York City is a great case study. I'm not going to go into it right now, but basically charter school
Hmm.
and funded 70% publicly, but the rest privately, I think. And
Mhm.
and their only strategy is that they're rigorous. There's no entry exam, and they focus. This is where they actually incorporate some DEI, but then they use hardcore, bare bones structure. And they
Mhm.
focus their population as poor Black and brown students. Okay, fine, that's sort of your population of interest. But you know what? Their math and reading scores 88 to 90% in terms of
Yeah.
proficiency, more so than white suburban kids across the river in New Jersey. So when you say that to someone who feeds into this narrative that you have to just give and lower standards, they don't know what to do with that. And then all of a sudden they flip it on you, and they just can't fathom that you're even saying what you're saying because they're so locked into that
Mhm.
ideology, and it becomes very difficult at that point. And sometimes people are able to shift how they think about things, but especially if you're talking to someone who has their heels in the sand with this stuff, you only reach a certain point until it's time to just kind of back away and say, I'm going to advocate for this thing. You can continue to think that way, and I'm just going to keep
Mhm.
pushing the information that actually has results. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, we'll call it a wrap for today. This was super interesting. I feel like
This
we
was
could we could
pretty
talk
good.
we could
Wow.
talk to you for hours and probably peel the layers of the onion up back on all kinds of different
It,
topics, and
yeah,
maybe we'll do that again on a specific
would
topic.
love that. Yeah.
Because I think
Yeah.
yeah, having your methodology and insights on specific topics might be great. Well, one, learning experience for us, but also good for our audience and
Yeah.
just to get a better, deeper understanding. But
Yeah.
what I can say is I love what you're doing. We follow your channel, and I hope you continue to do this because I don't see anybody like in this space giving what I feel like is fair perspective or
Well,
analysis
thank
of
you.
some of these issues. And I love what you're doing. And I selfishly hope that this actually turns into maybe your career path as being some kind of influencer where you can help the world unpack all this like craziness that's going on. So
Oh, I
yeah,
I
we wish
I
you luck.
appreciate that. No, really, I think that we're tapping into something. So thank you for doing what you do, and for you boys. I hopefully next time, if I come, I'd love to come back.
As we close out, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah. So for now, I think the easiest thing is my Instagram.
Okay.
My Instagram is just Anthony Rispo at Anthony Rispo, and my
Okay.
Substack link is there on in my the link section to my Instagram. But yeah, I try to post as much as I can, maybe twice a week or something. So that's where to find me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
We'll link that into the description of the show so people can check you out and follow your work. Thanks again so much for coming on. And we'll look forward to doing a circle back with you on one of these topics. So best of
Thank,
luck. Thanks
thank
so
you so
much.
much for
Thank
having
you.
me, guys.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. My pleasure.